Hi friends, today we will discuss an important topic in respiratory system, that is bronchiectasis. Before starting the topic, I would suggest that you download the MediLectures app on Play Store to download the PDF of this lecture and attempt various tests and quiz related to internal medicine. We are also having a Harrison based test series which will cover all the systems, that is entire Harrison, within 1 year duration, and the tests are uploaded according to a schedule which is followed by a grand quiz on each system. This schedule will help keeping the students on track, and you will be added to exclusive MediLectures WhatsApp group, and each quiz winner gets exciting prizes. So in this lecture we will first discuss the intro, followed by etiology, epidemiology, what is the pathogenesis of bronchiectasis, how the patient will present, how to diagnose this condition, what all treatment options are available, finally what are the complications and how to prevent. So friends, bronchiectasis refers to an irreversible airway dilatation that involves the lung either in focal or diffuse manner. So the important point to note is it is an irreversible condition. Now when we consider the types, it can be either cylindrical or tubular, that is the bronchiole is dilated in its diameter. It can be varicose, and finally there can be cystic dilatation of bronchioles. So when we consider the most common type is cylindrical, also known as tubular bronchiectasis. Now when we consider the etiology, it can be divided into infectious causes and non-infectious causes. Now the infectious cause is most commonly due to pneumonia. Which type of pneumonia? The bronchopneumonia. So the organisms include Mycobacterium tuberculosis, gram-negative organisms like Pseudomonas aeruginosa, Haemophilus influenza, then chlamydia, and organisms like Bordetella pertussis. So these are all the infectious causes which can lead to bronchiectasis. Now when we talk of non-infectious causes, which we will deal in detail, these include autoimmune conditions like rheumatoid arthritis, SLE, Sjogren syndrome. Then we have certain genetic conditions in which there is improper motility of cilia, so that these are not able to get rid of infections, and some other causes. Now based on the degree of involvement, it can be divided into focal bronchiectasis or diffuse bronchiectasis. Now this focal bronchiectasis means that the bronchiectasis is restricted to a localized area, and it is due to obstruction. Now this obstruction can be either an extrinsic obstruction, that is outside the airway, or intrinsic, that is within the airway. Now extrinsic can be caused by adjacent lymph node or any tumor. On the other hand, intrinsic obstruction can be airway tumor or due to foreign body aspiration, bronchial atresia or stenosis. So these all causes can lead to focal bronchiectasis. Now diffuse bronchiectasis means there is widespread bronchiectatic changes throughout the lung, and it is mainly due to underlying systemic condition or a infectious disease process. So this was about etiology, and let's go in detail of focal and diffuse bronchiectasis. So as we discussed, the focal bronchiectasis is due to obstruction, which can be either extrinsic or intrinsic, like aspirated foreign body, tumor mass or lymph node. For workup, we will go for chest imaging like X-ray and CT. The investigation of choice is HRCT, and especially for focal causes, we also have to do bronchoscopy to rule out the cause of obstruction. Now coming on to the diffuse cause of bronchiectasis, these are most commonly due to infections like bacterial, non-tubercular mycobacteria and tubercular mycobacteria. There can be immunodeficiency states like hypogammaglobulinemia, HIV, bronchiolitis obliterans after lung transplantation. There can be genetic causes like cystic fibrosis, Cartaginer alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency. There can be autoimmune conditions, especially common in females like rheumatoid arthritis, Sjogren syndrome, and immune-mediated disease like allergic bronchopulmonary aspergillosis. Recurrent aspiration can also lead to bronchiectasis, which will be diffuse, and then we have miscellaneous conditions. Now it is important to note, after all these causes, 25 to 50% cases of bronchiectasis are idiopathic. Now for infections, we will go for sputum staining, sputum gram staining and culture, and then we have to also detect acid-fast bacilli. And if no organisms are detected, then we can go for bronchoscopy with bronchoalveolar lavage. Similarly, for immunodeficiency states, we will do workup, that is immunoglobulin measurement, HIV testing, CBC, etc. For genetic causes, workup according to the disease. Again, for autoimmune or rheumatological causes, we go for the specific workup. And for recurrent aspiration, we will test the swallowing function and neuromuscular strength. Now, when we consider the diffuse bronchiectasis, it is involving the bilateral lung field and often involves a large area, but then also there is predominant involvement of the zones. So when we consider the upper lung fields, it is most commonly involved by cystic fibrosis, or it can also be involved in post-radiation fibrosis, in which the lung region encompassed by radiation port, that is the upper lung field, will be affected. Now the mid lung fields, when are these involved? These are usually involved with non-tubercular mycobacteria, that is Mycobacteria avium intracellulari complex, or there can be dyskinetic or immotile cilia. So in dyskinetic immotile cilia syndrome, the middle lung fields are most commonly involved. Now, when are the lower lung fields involved? These will be involved in chronic recurrent aspiration, which can be due to esophageal motility disorder like scleroderma. So there will be recurrent aspiration. These can also be involved in end stage fibrotic lung disease. So this will lead to tractional bronchiectasis from diseases like idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis. Now recurrent immunodeficiency associated infections especially due to hypogammaglobulinemia can also lead to bronchiectasis in the lower lung fields. Now when we consider these central airways, these are usually involved in allergic bronchopulmonary aspergillosis, in which there is immune mediated reaction to aspergillus which damages the bronchial wall, or there can be congenital causes like tracheobronchomegaly, which is known as Monier-Kuhn syndrome or William-Campbell syndrome. So these two syndromes will lead to bronchiectasis of the central airways. Now in epidemiology, the most important point is that females are more affected than males. So it is one of the very rare conditions in respiratory system in which females are more commonly affected than males. Now the epidemiology will vary greatly with the underlying etiology. For example, in patients of cystic fibrosis, the usual age of presentation is adolescence or early adulthood. On the other hand, if we consider due to Mycobacterium avium intracellulare, then these are usually females who are non-smoking and more than 50 years of age. So the presentation can vary very widely according to the etiology, and more importantly, when the tuberculosis prone areas are considered the most important causes Mycobacterium tuberculosis. Now, when we consider the pathogenesis of bronchiectasis, a very important hypothesis is vicious cycle hypothesis. This explains that whenever the pathogenesis of bronchiectasis is initiated, it forms a vicious cycle. For example, if the first step is airway infection due to a invading organism like tuberculosis, non-tubercular mycobacteria or gram-negative organism, this will lead to accumulation of neutrophils. Now, these neutrophils will lead to release of neutrophil elastase. This will lead to destruction of the airways. So, there is release of neutrophil elastase and leading to airway destruction. Now, the airway destruction leads to ciliary dysfunction, which further leads to obstruction, and the obstruction with stasis will further lead to airway infection. So, this is the vicious cycle. So, the etiology can be considered out of any of these 5 steps. So, if any of these 5 steps is impaired, it will lead to bronchiectasis. So, the airway infection can be caused by organisms, as we have discussed. There can be increased level of elastase in the body. In our body, there is one enzyme which fights against elastase, neutrophilic elastase, which is alpha-1 antitrypsin. So, if this enzyme is deficient, then the relative levels of elastase will be increased, and this will then favor the development of bronchiectasis in such patient. Now, airway destruction can be antibody mediated airway destruction. If it is IgG mediated, we have disorders like rheumatoid arthritis and Sjogren's syndrome, and IgE mediated destruction can be seen with allergic bronchopulmonary aspergillosis. Now, ciliary dysfunction can be due to genetic syndromes like Carter-Jenner syndrome or Young syndrome. So, in Carter-Jenner syndrome, we have a triad of sinusitis, situs inversus, and decreased sperm motility along with bronchiectasis. And in Young syndrome, we have obstructive azoospermia because our cilia are not functioning. Also, obstruction can be intrinsic as well as extrinsic due to lymph node tumor or any foreign body, as we have discussed. So, if any of these steps is invaded, it can lead to development of infectious bronchiectasis. This is known as vicious cycle hypothesis. Now, non-infectious bronchiectasis can be again immune mediated due to autoimmune conditions, or there can be tractional bronchiectasis following the fibrosis like post-radiation fibrosis or due to idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis. This will lead to tractional bronchiectasis due to stretching of the surrounding bronchioles. Now, when we consider the pathology, in bronchiectasis, there is small airway wall inflammation, there is destruction of large airway wall. This leads to loss of elastin, smooth muscle cartilages, and there is release of proteases like elastase, other mediators, cytokines, and reactive oxygen species. This all leads to the pathological changes which are seen in bronchiectasis. Now, coming on to the clinical features, the patient usually presents with persistent productive cough with thick tenacious sputum. So, the sputum is typically triple layered with outermost layer of serous fluid, then second layer is mucoid, and the innermost purulent layer. So, typically the sputum is triple layered. When we come to physical examination, there is presence of coarse scraps along with wheeze and some patients have occasional clubbing. When we do the pulmonary function testing, there is mild to moderate airflow obstruction which is irreversible, similar to COPD patients. So this is irreversible, similar to chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. Now when we come to diagnosis of this patient, it is usually based on the presentation with persistent chronic cough and sputum production accompanied with consistent radiographic features. So in radiography, we first go for chest X-ray, in which there is characteristic presence of tram track appearance. The image is on the next slide. And when we go for HRCT thorax, which is the investigation of choice for bronchiectasis, we can see various features like presence of tram track appearance, signet ring appearance. Now in signet ring appearance, the dilated airway becomes 1.5 times, more than 1.5 times than that of the adjacent vessel. If this is adjacent bronchial artery, then this airway will become more than 1.5 times of that vessel. There will be lack of bronchial tapering. This means there will be presence of tubular structures like airways within 1 centimeter of the pleural surface on HRCT. Therefore, these are not tapering. There will be bronchial wall thickening within the dilated airways. There will be inspissated secretions, which is often known as tree in bud appearance, and cysts will be emanating from the bronchial wall, particularly in the cystic bronchiectasis. So this is the X-ray of bronchiectasis, typically showing this tram track appearance. Clearly we can see the tram tracks in the lower zone of the X-ray. Also, some are present in the upper zone. And this is the CT showing cystic bronchiectasis. These dilated airways are present within 1 centimeter of the pleural surface. Also, these are typical cyst-like structures which are more than 1.5 times the adjacent vessel. Also, here we can see tram track appearance of dilated airway. Now let's come to the very important part, that is how to treat this condition. So the aims of the treatment should be the control of active infection if present. Then we have to improve the secretion clearance, and finally maintaining the bronchial hygiene to decrease the microbial load within the airway and minimize the risk of repeated infections. So first we will see the antibiotic therapy which has to be given in active infection. So antibiotics should be given which should cover the Haemophilus influenzae as well as Pseudomonas aeruginosa, and the typical duration should be 7 to 14 days. Now a very important drug is ceftazidime, which is considered the drug of choice for bronchiectasis because this will cover the most common organisms which are responsible for the exacerbation. Now if we have non-tubercular mycobacteria, that is Mycobacterium avium intracellular, and in this patient who is HIV negative and this bacteria is macrolide sensitive, so we can give combination of macrolide along with rifampicin and ethambutol. So this is the treatment by antibiotic. If Mycobacterium TB is suspected, definitely we have to give the ATT. Now for secretion clearance, that is maintaining the bronchial hygiene, we can give hydration and mucolytics. We can give bronchodilators and hyperosmolar agents like hypertonic saline via aerosolization, that is nebulization. We can go for chest physiotherapy. Now this chest physiotherapy helps in postural drainage of the secretions, as well as we can go for traditional mechanical chest percussion with hand clapping or other devices. Then we have pulmonary rehabilitation program, regular exercise program, and a specific mucolytic dornase known as DNase is used in patients of cystic fibrosis related bronchiectasis. Now, when we consider the anti-inflammatory therapy, that is oral or systemic steroids, these can be used in allergic bronchopulmonary aspergillosis and autoimmune conditions like rheumatoid arthritis and Sjogren's syndrome. But definitely these have not to be used in infectious bronchiectasis because these will flare up the infections. Now coming on to the complications. In severe cases of infectious bronchiectasis, repeated infections and repeated course of antibiotic can lead to microbial resistance. So this is one of the very important complication. There can be injury to superficial mucosal vessels, and if there is a bleeding from bronchial artery, this can lead to hemoptysis, which can sometimes be massive and life-threatening. So utmost care should be taken of the patient who presents with hemoptysis. Now coming on to the last part of this lecture, how to prevent. Suppose a patient is immunodeficient, we can administer gamma globulin in such patients. We should administer the vaccine in chronic pulmonary diseases like COPD. Vaccine like influenza vaccine and pneumococcal vaccine should be administered so that these bacteria and viruses do not lead to repeated infections. Smoking cessation should be considered if the patient is a chronic smoker. And finally, here is more important, suppressive antibiotic therapy. We can give alternate day macrolides after ruling out the QT prolongation. Then we can give ciprofloxacin 1 to 2 weeks per month, IV ceftazidime 3 days per month, or nebulization with tobramycin 30 days on and 30 days off. So these are suppressive antibiotic for prophylaxis of the acute exacerbation.